Hello, Blue Jays fans. Welcome to episode 242 of the Jays from the Couch radio podcast, brought to you by jaysfromthecouch.com. Thanks for tuning in for another week of Blue Jays talk. We're so happy you could join us this week, whether it's on Facebook or YouTube or on Twitter. We're coming at you live, and we appreciate you tuning in. As always, don't forget, if you missed this live broadcast, you can get the audio version on Apple, Google, Spotify. Anywhere you find a podcast, you'll find Jays from the Couch Radio. We've got a great episode for you this week. We've got, of course, I'll be joined by Jays from the Couch writer Steve Fichetti, but we've got a special guest talking about the Pittsburgh Pirates, which I know if you're watching or listening, you might think, huh? However, there is lots to talk about. We've got former deals. We've got potentially present deals. Lots and lots and lots of history here between these two franchises. And we've got a very special guest, Craig Toth of the Bucs in the Basement podcast, will be joining us here in a brief moment. And to help me do all of this, because there's a lot to talk about, I will bring in Jays from the Couch writer, Steve Fichetti. Good evening to you.
Great to be back, Sean. How are you?
I'm doing well. You know, I couldn't leave you out, knowing full well that we're talking Pittsburgh Pirates. I believe you said once you lived just outside of Pittsburgh. Am I correct in that?
I'm actually in the city, just over the hill from downtown, actually. So
there you go. So, I mean, to anybody not familiar with Pittsburgh, they'll have no idea what you mean, but we're going to say you live right there. You're right in it. So it was only a natural fit for you to join us on the podcast here. So thanks again, Steve, for joining me.
Well, again, that's how I connected with you guys, because when we thought there'd be a Pittsburgh Blue Jays, I reached out to you, said if I can be of any help, you know, as the Jays play here. And of course, our government made sure that didn't happen, but still, it still worked out.
It did. And I noticed you're sporting your Jays from the Couch swag there.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yes,
Absolutely.
That's right. Jays from the Couch merchandise can be found at our Redbubble shop, and 100% of the profits will go toward the ALS Society of Canada. It's a personal charity that means a lot to me. My wife's father passed away about 2.5 years ago from ALS, and so I've dedicated our Redbubble page to funding the ALS Society and the research that they do, and hopefully one day figure out how to beat that terrible disease. So, Steve, I want to thank you for that purchase there. All right. Are you ready, Steve? We're going to bring in...
I'm ready.
and oddly, this is... I had no idea, you know, like I didn't mine a connection or a guest from you. I just reached out to our next guest, and it just so happens that he's pretty keen. So let's bring him on in here. He's had enough waiting and listening to us, all the way from Steeltown. Craig Toth, the co-host of Bucs in the Basement podcast and co-editor of InsideTheBucsBasement.com. How are you?
I'm doing great, guys. Sean and Steve, it's great to sit down and talk to you guys. I was saying before, I've not interacted with a lot of Blue Jays fans, but looking back on the history, some of the present stuff that's going on and some of the trade discussions, it makes sense to talk to you guys.
Absolutely it does. And when you start to peel back the layers, it actually makes more and more sense each time you know, oh, well, what about this? What about this? What about that? It just keeps going, right?
Yeah, I'm just waiting for whenever you guys are going to put the dagger in my heart, because there's like two trades that if you guys bring up, it's just, I don't even want to think about them anymore.
All right. Well, since you asked, let's hop in our Wayback Machine here, and let's go back a few years, about 12 years, and we'll talk about 2008. Ugh. You know, I have to ask you, out of curiosity, how is Robinson Diaz doing?
Is he still alive? I'm not even really sure. I honestly have no idea. I hope he's doing well. I mean, I wish no ill will upon him. He wasn't the main culprit in the trade. It was, and I hate to say it, Joey Bats, when we gave him to you, because we basically did just give him to you.
Yes.
The first year he played up there, I was just like, we didn't screw him up. And then all of a sudden it was like, yeah, we did.
Yes, we did.
Yeah, we really screwed this guy up. Like, he got with one of your hitting coaches, worked on his swing a little bit, and he just became. It was like I said, that's just a dagger in the heart. I was thinking maybe we didn't screw him up, but you know what? We did. We screwed him up.
Well, I don't know. I don't know about screwed him up, but I mean, maybe it was just a matter of him coming to Toronto helped get him in, right. Let's say, right. But
don't get him off that easy. No.
Well, here's the thing: is we're not like the only team that gave up on him. I mean, you could heckle some Orioles fans on here. I mean, there was like a Rule 5 pick there, so he had a decent amount of chances and just could never figure anything out. And I'm actually glad he did in Toronto. Sure, it hurts as a Pirates fan, but I mean, at least he didn't do it for the Yankees or the Dodgers or somebody else. If it was somebody like that, it would hurt a little bit more. But for doing it for the Blue Jays, I don't know too many people that have Blue Jays hate, I guess it would be. There's not too many people I know that hate the Blue Jays.
No, and we do heckle the Orioles and and their fans on this show enough. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, maybe one of you could correct me, but he also spent some time in Tampa Bay.
He did, all in the same season. It was Pittsburgh, Baltimore, Kansas City, Tampa Bay.
Yeah, just insane. And then, of course, he managed, Jose Bautista managed to become an icon. Let me see if I can point to it directly. There he is. See, this is all backwards to me, but there he is, the bat flip. So, okay, Craig, we'll let that one go.
Okay.
50 home runs, whatever. It's not a big deal. Listen, and I only say this because, as Blue Jays fans, we don't have quite enough. We don't get to celebrate as often enough, and we certainly don't get to rub things in other teams' fan bases very much. So I hope you'll come back some other time instead of saying, "Wow, this guy's."
I'm waiting for the chance for us to rub it into somebody because we just really haven't. I don't think ever got to do that. But that's just. I mean, I could go to 2012. I mean, we could go when we sent you Brad Lincoln and got Travis Snyder. We got the lunchbox for a season and a half, and he's out there in right field and plays some pretty decent defense, hits 10 plus home runs and everything. Yeah, that's the only one. That's not even close. Yeah, that's not even close.
and think about this, Craig. Travis Snyder. We around these parts, we used to say things like, "Man, the Blue Jays haven't had an offensive prospect like Travis Snyder in years." Like that. At the time, he was he was supposed to be pretty big for Toronto.
Oh yeah, when he back in I think it was around 2008 or so, back when he was in the minors, he had 20 some home runs in the minor season. He always had a pop in his bat. But when he didn't connect, man, he didn't connect. But he was there for part of a playoff run for us. So and here's the thing is, Pirates fans find these players that they find endearing, and Travis Snyder was one of those players where he gets a good nickname. He's a guy that's a lot of hustle and stuff. So I don't even think, if you asked, I'd probably say 10 Pirates fans today where Travis Snyder came from. I bet you money 50% of them wouldn't even know where he came from.
Wow,
that's because then he was gone so quickly, and everybody remembers that he brought in Steven Brault now. When we made the trade, and then we actually ended up bringing Travis Snyder back. So, I mean, a lot of people just think of Travis Snyder here as a Pirate. So,
So I have a couple of other items to, just to relive the past a little bit. But Steve, I want to give you the opportunity to hit Craig up for one of the past deals that you might want to discuss. I don't want to hog the whole show.
Well, you're the boss. You're the boss. I'm just the eye candy. Okay. I let you guys talk baseball, but I mean, I was going to say the Drew Hutchinson deal.
Yeah.
Okay. Joey Batista is an all-time great Blue Jay, but to dump Drew Hutchinson in Pittsburgh and for Liriano and who you'd think would have been a hands-off prospect in Reese McGuire, which we know is not true about him being hands-off. I mean, that's another deal that I think really I mean, if I was, I think Ben Cherington has a chance to get back at the Blue Jays because he knows the system so intimately. I really think that Ross Atkins gets nervous when he hears Ben Cherington's voice on the phone as far as trying to make a deal because Cherington knows the system. And I guarantee you, Rogers, it says you need to exact some kind of revenge on the Blue Jays for all that we have done for them. So,
well, but yeah, hold on. And Craig, I'll let you respond here. But if you ask me, Toronto was doing Pittsburgh a favor, in taking on Francisco Liriano and Reese McGuire. I know at the time it didn't seem like it, but really hasn't amounted to a whole lot. So I think, in my opinion, that they were doing Pittsburgh a favor in taking on that money. But Craig, I'll let you respond here.
I love that Steve called it the Drew Hutchinson deal. I've never heard it called that before in my life, but I appreciate that little bit of a stab. But yeah, I mean, at the time, I can remember when this deal was coming out, and I knew we were going to unload Liriano's contract to somebody. And Liriano, for that, for a period of time there was untouchable, but he was just getting knocked all over the place. I mean, it was basically taking on $17 million, but the way the trade played out in real time was so strange. They said, Liriano's going to Toronto and there's some prospects involved. So I automatically assumed, we're the ones getting the prospects back. That's awesome. We're actually going to get something in this deal. And then all of a sudden I heard, Harold Ramirez. And I'm like, well, that's one of our guys. So maybe there's one prospect from the Blue Jays coming back and somebody else. And then all of a sudden they're like Reese McGuire. And I'm like, well, those are our prospects. Like, who are we getting back? And it was like Drew Hutchinson. And I just remember thinking to myself, wow, Liriano must not be thought of very highly whatsoever. And, the whole Reese McGuire thing, in the end, it ended up being pretty much a nothing of a trade is what ended up happening there, strangely, because Harold Ramirez is in the outfield for the Marlins now. Reese McGuire is probably number 4 on your catching depth, 3 or 4. And yeah. And Drew Hutchinson, once again, I'll ask, is he alive? I have no idea. He went a couple other places before that, but to me, it was just, ended up being not a good deal for either team.
Yeah, I mean, Toronto tried to, they used Liriano in the bullpen and, tried, but it didn't last very long. One thing I do want to talk to you about before we kind of focus on the now was Jay Happ kind of went to Pittsburgh and Ray Searage fixed him. Yeah. And, really, I don't know, maybe you could shed some insight on it, but, really revived his career almost. So now looking at Jay Happ coming to Toronto and then New York and where he is now, potentially I've heard rumors about Jay Happ even, maybe even coming back to Toronto, which, but I wonder if you might be able to, Craig, just kind of talk about the Jay Happ reclamation and what it's done for his career, and what is it that Ray Searage did?
Ray Searage had a formula. It was a way for pitchers. He took pitchers that were struggling, and the sinker ball was a big thing for him. And he didn't mold the pitchers into themselves. He kind of molded them into a system that would work for them. And for about 5 years there, any pitcher he took built a lot of confidence in them. And if you look back on it, I mean, I think, of Garrett Cole, and I think of AJ Burnett as some of the harder throwing, power type pitchers that were in that type of system. But for a Jay Happ, I think it was more of giving him that confidence because I'll tell you right now, Searage would tell them exactly where to throw the ball on almost every single pitch. He was that in tuned. And for a while before teams caught on to it, that kind of got, Happ the contract the smaller contract he got in Toronto. And then of course the, much larger contract that he got from the Yankees. But the biggest thing about this is that he shouldn't have actually gone anywhere after his last year with Pittsburgh. I don't know if you guys know the story, but basically Neil Huntington had talked to his agent and said, this is how much we're going to offer. Before you get another deal, come back and ask us, and we'll see if we can match it or maybe up it a little bit. And basically Happ was like, this is not how I want to do things. So he just went and signed with the Blue Jays and never called the Pirates back to even like let them match the offer or anything. So to me, it should have been, we want you so much that this is our offer, and we're going to maybe even do a little bit of an overpay. But instead they almost said, you know what, we basically saved you, so you kind of owe us, is what it kind of boiled down to. And he's just like, you know what? No, I'm going to go someplace else and kind of take the knowledge you've given me. And we saw that it turned out, fairly well for him on occasions. But at this point in time, I mean, he's getting to be up there. So you got to kind of reinvent yourself. And it's finding out that, J Happ is a solid pitcher. Not as great as he was at certain points in time, but it would have been nice to have him going into like the 2016 season with him instead of just basically letting him walk because you were just trying to mess around with the numbers with him. And that's what ended up happening there.
Right. And I'm sure that's probably a rather common story, around baseball. I wonder if does that, Craig, give us insight into how the Pirates operated, and if so, how does that change now with Ben Cherington at the driver's seat?
Well, I think the biggest thing that happens right now is the separation between the business side and the baseball side, because before you had Frank Coonley in there and Neil Huntington. And Coonley, I think, as on the business side of things, had a little bit too much to say, a little bit of influence on moves, a little bit of influence on players that they would want to pick up. And at this point in time, Nutting just said, I'm going to bring Travis Williams in. He's a, great business mind, not even a great baseball business mind, just a businessman, from hockey. And he's just going to deal with that side of things. And I'm going to bring in, Ben Cherington to do the baseball side of stuff. So I think that everybody will say, the Ington, the Huntington, the Cherington. I do think they are from a similar cloth, but I wouldn't say from the same cloth. I think that, Huntington was not given the steering wheel so much as, hey, Neil, you can drive this for a little bit, but if Frank has something to say, we're going to let him have his input. And, I think that's where it's going to be different is Cherington has, shown that he can build up farm systems. And he said before if he came back to be a GM, he had gotten offered jobs in, I think it was San Francisco. The Mets had kind of called on him a little bit before. And he was just like, no, I need to, go where there's a place where I can build up a system. So in that aspect, I see him and Huntington a little bit the same, but I think Huntington just got a little bit too cocky that every single pick that he was bringing in was turning into gold, especially like the reclamation projects. And I don't see Cherington having that type of idea. I think has the type of idea of building from the bottom up as opposed to trying to bring in players and as any type of reclamation projects. We're going to try to build on what we have. So it's going to be a little bit different.
Right. And Steve, feel free to jump in here because I could just go, I can pepper Craig all day with questions.
Well, I was going to really only kind of go back to Huntington, and I'm glad that Craig brought up the fact that he sort of fell in love with everybody he drafted, fell in love with everybody that he brought in, and that when it came time for the Pirates to add at trade deadlines, and they had 3 really great years, and they could have maybe extended that another year or two, but Huntington just seemed to think, oh my God, this single A pitcher, is going to be our future, and we can't trade him to get, an everyday outfielder or, a valuable utility guy or another bullpen piece. Huntington fell into that trap that I know behind the scenes, Sean, we've talked about, that maybe the Shapiro Atkins group is also doing, where they're starting to show the tendency that, wait a minute, this guy is too valuable to let go. So maybe we really can't make a move. I might be reading more into that, but what do you think, Craig? Do you think that Huntington is guilty of that?
Well, he was extremely guilty of that, where he that's why, because I do a lot of, I love the prospects. I go to a lot of minor league baseball games and different stuff like that, but I try to kind of ease that into people, because they're so tired of hearing about, well, this prospect's going to be great and this prospect's going to be great. And it was everybody that, that Huntington had brought in. He was just like, this is my guy, and this is what he's going to do. But like I said, it was another thing of where, they put them, it was like, okay, here's the hole, here's the the peg, and we're going to try to drive it through this hole, as opposed to doing something different with it. And he was just, if you were over 6'2" and a right-handed high school pitcher, Neil Huntington thought that he could make the world of you. And there were some of those guys that, just weren't developed properly, and they weren't, pitched to their strengths. And it was pitched to, everybody has to pitch the same way within the system. It's almost like thinking about, I'm a huge Penguins fan. They mold the people to come up and play a system that is good. And you know what, in some sports that works, but in baseball, there's so many different individual players that you can't work that into a system. And yeah, I think that there was times where they probably should have moved on from some guys. I think there's other times where they should have developed guys differently, but they kind of fell into, hey, we've done this right for the past 3 or 4 years, so we're just going to keep on doing it. And when the rest of the league caught up with them and saw what they were doing, the biggest part is they never made an adjustment. They just never. It's like those halftime adjustments or the in-game adjustments. They just never did it, and that's where like they said, they got a little bit too full of themselves and didn't. And here's the thing: is they should have actually probably started to rebuild after 2016, 2017, which they were thinking about doing. But as soon as they hit a hot streak on Neil's, prospects, that's when they make that horrible trade, to get Chris Archer and give away, more than they should have, because he was just like, I'm smarter than everybody else. I'm the smartest man in the room. And it found out that, you hit on a bunch of stuff, but you miss one thing here. As a team that doesn't have the money to spend, or I shouldn't say doesn't have the money, won't spend the money. Won't spend the money. Then you can't, one or two of those little mistakes here and there and sets the franchise back, 5, 6, 7 years very easily. So right. And when you're in a room with anybody from the Tampa Bay Rays organization, you are not the smartest person in the room. No. and that continues to play out. Move after move after move. I don't know. I just sit in awe, and that deal is one of them. The Chris Archer trade is certainly one of them. So, Craig, where are the Pirates now? Obviously, when you bring in Ben Cherington, and based on your previous comments, you're obviously in a rebuild. No, we're not. We're in a build. Build. Cannot say that R word. You cannot say that in Pittsburgh. It is a build.
Can we call it an expansion team? Because in essence, that's really what it has become. Yeah, and it's not a bad thing. I think that's great that Cherington is tearing everything down. And I know that you and Chris have talked about maybe they should break it down even further and why we bring in signing certain guys, on their most recent podcast. But yeah, it's going to be an interesting couple of years for sure here.
Yeah, and going back to what Sean was saying, it is a rebuild, and that's, to me, it's not a bad thing to say it, but I think that if you say the word rebuild, then they look at, okay, is this a 3-year rebuild or a 5-year rebuild? And I don't think that Ben wants to be kind of pigeonholed into that. And I don't blame him for that, because with the type of team that he was handed, he did what the best he could do. He, traded away Starling Marte, who was your number one trade chip. And at this point in time, we have trade chips, but they're not to the same, level as a Starling Marte. They just aren't. They're not going to be an everyday player in essence, and they're not going to be, a 3+ WAR player almost every year. So, I mean, it is a rebuild, but I think it's a little bit different because I was talking when I talked with Chris and Gary and whoever. If you look at our team right now, there is a slew of prospects that are sitting down there in low A and high A of where they would have been last year. And then you move up to double A and triple A, and it's no offense to the guys that are there, but it's just a wasteland. There is not a whole lot of talent or high-end talent. There's probably some role players in there, and that's fine. You need those guys as well. But the way that Ben Cherington's looking to do this is that you need to have, instead of having, 10 prospects scattered throughout your system that are, going to be everyday contributors, that you need probably 10 to 15 at every level. And that's going to take time to accumulate those. I mean, it's going to take time to build up that system. And right now, I mean, with the timetable and everything, I think that's where you don't know how long it's going to take, because like how long does it actually take to build up a triple A, a double A, and then the single A system with, 10 to 15 possible contributors. And if anybody falls off, then you have, other people waiting in the wings. But right now, you can look at it right now. They have, I hate to say, there's at AAA is barren right now. There's like nobody at AAA, maybe one pitcher, Cody Bolton, I'm thinking of, and, who hasn't shown himself yet, that would be coming up from AAA. And then hitting wise, it's a bunch of guys that have had their chances or haven't proven enough to even be major league ready. So that's where I think that, when people say, oh, in 2022, 2023, we're going to start competing, I tell them to pump the brakes a little bit, because that's basically guaranteeing you that everybody that should have been in single A last year when the minor league season was canceled is going to be ready, and they're all going to come in and be great starting in 22 and 23. Like, what's the chances of that happening? I mean, so it's definitely a rebuild, and I think it's going to be a lot slower. And I don't know if there's any way to speed it up unless you can make trades.
Right. And I think for those Blue Jays fans who are watching live on YouTube or on Facebook or on Twitter or are listening to the audio version, we're sitting with Craig Toth, the co-host of the Bucs in the Basement podcast. And I think, Craig, that one thing that the Blue Jays listeners can take away from that is just how, I don't want to use the word exceptional, but how kind of amazing it is that the Toronto Blue Jays were able to kind of do a rebuild on the fly and get to where they are now, where they're close to being a legitimate contender in the postseason, and in relatively short order, right? They made the playoffs in 2016, and here we are in 2020, and they're back having completely overhauled their roster. So you mentioned trades. I want to ask you, Joe Musgrove, if he were to be made available, and I think he fits in that category of a trade chip, but not necessarily kind of an elite trade chip. So what is it that the Pirates would be looking for because the Blue Jays need starting pitching? That's clear. Whether they, and I hope to God that they ignore the Trevor Bauer rumors out there and they just move on. But if they're looking to Pittsburgh and call up Ben and say, hey, buddy, we want Joe, what do you think, Craig, is it going to cost?
Well, I think that we had an inkling of that happening at this most recent trade deadline, and that it didn't get worked out. And I honestly think that Ben ask at that point in time may have been a little bit too much. I honestly think that Ben is looking for that high end talent. So and especially since he went after Brennan Malone from the Diamondbacks, that he would almost be looking for somebody who was drafted fairly recently. And you guys have two pitchers. It's MLB pipeline. I mean, you have Alex Manoah. I think he's sitting there around like 5 or 6. Had just drafted, was it CJ Van Eck? He's sitting down there like around like 10 or 11. And I honestly think that Ben was trying to get one of those guys, at least one of them included in that trade. And that's where I think it possibly kind of fell through, just because, well, number one, Joe Musgrove was injured. We didn't know what he was going to be like when he came back. But also, I mean, I see Toronto when you say, I mean, you guys right now, you got Nate Pearson, you got Ryu, you just got Robbie Ray back for 1 year. What is it? You have Rod Stripling and who's the other one I'm thinking about? Tanner Roark.
I was going to say Steve's favorite guy.
Tanner Roark, yeah. So you there, but then if you look at it, I mean, you still have Murphy coming up, who he only got a little bit of a spot, in some relief and everything, but has been a starter throughout his whole minor league career, coming up here pretty soon. So, and you've got a bunch of young players that you are going to hold on to. So, I feel like that you guys are in compete now mode, but you are also not wanting to give away stuff that is going to be coming up within the next couple of years. Somebody that would be, maybe like a 2022 or maybe even a 2023. I think that you guys would still be looking to be in that area. So I think his ask for Musgrove at that point in time, and I think it's going to, for some reason, I think that he's trying to get at least a top 10 prospect out of there, but I don't think that he should be maybe directing it as much towards pitching. I would honestly be looking towards middle infielders in your organization. If that's where I would be looking, I think you guys have a decent amount of depth there. Everybody's going to yell at me to get a catcher. We're not getting Kirk. So all Pirates fans can just forget about that at this point in time. They're not giving Kirk, guys. I'm sorry, Pirates fans. They're not. It's not happening. So if that's your ask, that's way too much. And to be honest, you guys just added one of your younger catchers to the 40-man here recently, correct?
Yeah.
I can't remember his name. It's on the top.
Gabriel Moreno?
Yeah.
Moreno, yeah. You guys just added him, but you didn't protect somebody who's a little bit older. That's kind of he's a little bit further down on the list. I'm trying to think of who it would be. He's sitting down there around like 23 or so. I'm gonna have to cheat here. Yes. Who's got some pop in the bat? He plays okay defensively. Not sure if he's going to stick. I think we may be able to you guys would be able to part with him because it doesn't seem like that maybe he's a part of the plans anymore. But I don't even know if I would want him because if he's not a part of your plans, then how good is he? Do you know what I mean? Really? But that's where I don't think for me, I'm looking at pitching and it might be a little bit further down than the top 10. And I'm looking for any middle infielders. Chris and I are on the same wavelength. I want as many shortstops as I can get in this system. They'll say we're middle infield heavy. We have a lot of middle infielders. I wouldn't say we're middle infield heavy. And a lot of those guys end up moving to third base, second base, left field, center field, because they're the most athletic guys on the field. So that's where I would be aiming towards. And I know we're not going to get your top shortstop. So I'd start looking down the list a little bit, but people seem to think that since Lance Lynn brought back a top 100 prospect that Joe Musgrove is, and I just shake my head. I mean, Joe Musgrove's a solid guy. He is. And yeah, he's still kind of young, 27. He's not ancient. And some guys take time to fill out, and he's finally getting to pitch the way he wants to pitch. So at this point in time, I'm almost wondering if it would be but it's a gambling thing. Could Musgrove stay healthy and maybe try to give him to somebody at the deadline once a team finds out who they are and they might be a little bit more desperate? Because I just don't see Musgrove a guy who, has an ERA, a career ERA, like of up over like 4.5, being a guy that's going to bring back a top 100 prospect. I just really don't see it. So my question would be is who do you see because you guys know the J system a lot better than I do, as to who they would possibly be willing to part with. I mean, if you give me Alex Manoah and that's it, I will take him in a heartbeat. I'm a West Virginia baseball fan, born and bred, and I've seen that guy pitch, but it's not going to happen. So, yeah,
right.
But go down the list a little bit further, and you guys have interesting prospects. You have a fairly good like full system of pitchers, in middle infielders, and catchers. So I mean, you're not going to be able to use everybody.
So I have to ask the question then: does Reese McGuire even factor into this conversation?
If Ben Cherington would take Reese McGuire back, it would be hard for me to be a Pirates fan anymore, because I hate to say it like that. I mean, you guys figure out that his ceiling is as a backup catcher. That's his ceiling, and he's still he's not old yet. As we saw that Jacob Stallings could kind of reinvent himself and be. He's our starting catcher right now, but on any other team, he would be a backup catcher and would be a solid backup catcher. But yeah, last year at this time, Chris and I were saying we would take one of any of, I think it was Jansen, McGuire, or Maley. And we got Maley. Unfortunately, he, broke his finger and then didn't get to play. Right. And now he's in Milwaukee. But I was fine with giving any of those three guys a shot, because I didn't see any of the three of them as the full-time catcher of the future. I saw them as catchers in waiting. And I think that's what it may turn out to be at this point in time. And I don't think any of them are bad, but I don't think any of them do anything to move the needle for me whatsoever.
Fair. So if I were to offer you Riley Adams, Toronto Blue Jays 23rd ranked prospect, Riley Adams, and Otto Lopez, number 13 in their system, shortstop, second baseman, how close does that get us?
I mean, that's getting a little bit closer. I think if we're going to go with the shortstop, I would probably find myself. I was looking at this guy here, and I don't want to. I can pronounce his last name, but I always say or Elvis, because I'm a huge Elvis fan. But or Elvis Martinez. If you would pair him with Adams, I think that would get the deal done for me. I know that Pirates fans would probably be upset, because they would say we're going after another shortstop. Didn't we just get Liover Peguero? But at this point in time, I mean, the guys that are that far down the system, to say they're going to be somebody's everyday shortstop, I'd rather have 3 or 4 shortstops sitting down there at the same level and be fighting for playing time, than basically, putting all your eggs in the Liover Peguero and Nick Gonzalez basket. And those guys could turn out to be great, but I just don't want to do that. And I do think, I think that Adams would be a great catcher to have in the system, just because he is a little bit older, and we could probably plug him in, AA, AAA, and be okay for now. And do I see him as a catcher of the future? No, but look, Jacob Stallings, 30 years old. I mean, you need a backup catcher of the future too.
Right.
So that's a guy that I feel that could go into that. And I see Steve pointing. You got to say something.
Well, I was going to say, how much, and again, you've suffered as much as any other Pirate fan watching it, the Pirates defense over the last 2 or 3 years. How much does that influence you saying bring in as many middle infielders as we possibly can? And I think that really has been to the detriment of Musgrove and Trevor Williams and other guys like that, where the defense has been so bad. Musgrove's adjusted ERA, when you factor in the defensive things, is closer to 3.5, 3.6 than it is 4.2, 4.3. So how much does watching the Pirates defense day in, day out the last 2 or 3 years, how does that influence your desire to bring in a middle infielder?
I just basically think that, to me, the middle infielders are, just going up. It's catcher, second base, shortstop, and center field are the main positions for me. And like I said, I would stock it with the shortstops just because, like I said, they tried out Cole Tucker out in center field. And to tell you the truth, if they would have made that move sooner in his career, I'm still saying the bat would still have to come around, but he wouldn't have looked as terrible out there as he did this past year, because he's a very athletic person, and that may have been their goal all along, because I don't know if right when the whole shutdown happened, he was going to be one of the first guys that was sent down to AAA when they thought they were going to, everything was just paused for like 2 weeks. And I think that may have been the plan all along, was to get him some outfield reps in AAA and have him work into the position. And then when there was no minor league season, it was almost like, okay, we're just going to try this because what can we lose at this point in time? But what you can lose is some pitchers is what you can lose, the confidence of some pitchers. And the crazy part is Mitch Keller the year before had that great FIP, which he didn't even know what a FIP was until he saw it on a screen, and he had to go Google it. That's a great story. I think he was on with Ben Lindbergh on Effectively Wild, and he told that story. And I stopped my car because I was laughing so hard. I thought I was going to wreck my car if I didn't pull over. He didn't know why he was pitching so poorly. And it was basically because of, a lot of bad luck. But then this year, the FIP and ERA almost flipped, where it's like the FIP went higher, but the ERA was lower, because I think that Ben did focus a decent amount on defense. He basically tried to put the best defensive team out there. He realized that Kevin Newman was no longer a shortstop. He can't defensively play the field. And he moved more to second base. And unfortunately, he had one of his, worst performances at second base. Started playing Colin Moran more at first base, because he's not a great defensive first baseman, but a heck of a lot better than Bell. Got to see Hayes come up. Eric Gonzalez is a very good defensive shortstop, and Adam Frazier filled out in left field. They actually, I think, kind of adjusted to that more. I would just think that they would hopefully change. If I'm saying draft, get all these shortstops, I want young shortstops. I'm saying I want 18, 19, 20-year-old shortstops where their position can be changed, in AA, AAA, or whatever it would be. And to move with that position is, instead of letting somebody figure it out on the fly in the majors. And that's why I would say, that's why I look when somebody's like, oh, we want this guy because he plays center, left, and right field. And it's like, well, if he plays center, left, and right field, probably the team that's bringing him up has already noticed that he's not a full-time center fielder and has tried to move him off into those positions. I'd rather get somebody with a lot more athleticism because there's not too many, when I look at it, just purebred center fielders. And in this system, everybody's banking on Swaggerty, and it's no offense to Travis Swaggerty. He probably wouldn't talk to me if I saw him on the street, because I've always said I went to see him play in 2019 down in Bradenton. He wasn't even the best player on his own team. Cal Mitchell played a better center field than Travis Swaggerty, and Pirates fans are banking on Swaggerty. You're going to be disappointed. So that's why I say I want – go ahead, Steve.
No. I'm just going to say Anthony Alford, thank you.
Oh, for taking?
Yeah, I'm seriously, Pirate fans are going to love him.
Yeah.
Oh,
he's going to quiet the center field talk down tremendously. Great guy, great talent, and I think the Pirates are going to get the most out of him.
Yeah, and that's where I think that they're saying the Pirates are still saying they want to bring in another outfielder, but I honestly think that center field, at least in spring training, is going to be Anthony Alford's job to lose, just because the dude's athletic as hell out there, and if his bat even approaches his potential, he's a guy that I think we kind of stole that one. It was a sneaky little play by Ben, and he unfortunately busted his elbow and was out. But yeah, Anthony Alford, I listened to him. He was on one of our other podcasts down here in Pittsburgh, and he was on the whole time, and it sounded like just a great guy. And I'm hoping that that's what ends up happening. But I'm also still thinking we just, we need to get depth at every position. So,
well, I can tell you, as somebody who's spoken to Alfred many times here on the podcast, he's one that I was very upset to see leave the organization, and glad that he was able to find himself somewhere where he can get the opportunity. You guys will love him as well. So, Craig, just before we let you go, I have an offer for you on Joe Musgrove. So I think we're good with Riley Adams, and instead of Aurelvis Martinez, at number 7, how about Miguel Geraldo, our number 9 prospect?
No, thank you.
All right. It's okay. You know what?
We're a tough crowd in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, to tell you the truth, here's the thing: is I think that I don't know. I could possibly be talked into it. I definitely wouldn't say no. That was more for just effect and everything. I think that there would need to be some discussion back and forth. But like I said, I think that's more of the range is like maybe somebody from like your 7 to, like you said, 7 to 9, middle infielder, and then possibly a catcher just to have a little bit more depth in our system. Because right now, we have Jacob Stallings, we got Michael Perez, who we got from Tampa, and we got Andrew Susak, who's been a journeyman, and he's like pretty much one of our only guys who's at AAA. So I'd like to build that up as well. And like I said, I know we're not going to go too high on that, and I don't think you guys are going to give us any of your top 10 pitchers. The only other guy that interested me, if it wouldn't be anybody like that, I like Trent Palmer. You guys down at number 28. The kid has a good curveball and a good changeup. The curveball he's kind of been working on. And I was watching him when the draft was happening, and he was like one of the guys I studied a lot. Big frame. I kind of like him. So if you guys want to throw a third player in there, and then we'll give you I don't even know who we could give you somebody else back there. We'll give you Cole Tucker. Actually, you know what? I'd like to maybe get rid of him. Maybe he could play center field for you guys.
Done. Done. Awesome. All right, we are out of time here. So Craig Toth of Bucs in the Basement, I want to thank you so much. Let our listeners know how they can follow you. I'm very happy to have reached out into Pittsburgh Pirates area. A good buddy of mine passed away, Jason Rollison. I don't know if you know him, but he covered.
Oh yeah, he was amazing, man. I read his stuff from back in when he was doing Bucs Dugout, and he was actually the inspiration for me starting the podcast, because he'd been doing the podcast at the time. So I started, doing that and writing and everything. And Gary knows him a lot better than I do, and that just broke all of our hearts down here, man.
Yeah. Jason was key in getting me started here at Jays from the Couch, and so I'm happy to have reached out and to find somebody else down in Pittsburgh. So thank you so much for joining us. Let everybody know how they can follow you and all that stuff.
I'm on Twitter. I'm at Bucs Basement. Also on Facebook, Bucs in the Basement. I have an Instagram, but I don't really post too much stuff on there. But just usually hit me up on Twitter. That's where I'm most active at.
Yeah. And you know why you don't use Instagram? Because you're not a 14-year-old kid. That's why. I was told it. Chris told me, get an Instagram. I post our podcast there every week, and that's about the only time I'm ever on there. Yeah, I was told the same thing. You got to have Instagram, and I don't know what's worse, not having it or having it and not using it. I don't know. Both. Both. You're right. All right, Craig, thank you so much for joining us, and I hope that you'll come back on and we can chat more baseball.
Absolutely, guys. I enjoyed this so much, Steve and Sean. I appreciate this, guys. Thanks for reaching out to me. I appreciate it, guys.
Anytime. All right, you take care.
Oh, take it easy, brothers.
All right. All right, Steve, we're at the end. That was awesome. I'm glad that you could join us for our Toronto Blue Jays, Pittsburgh Pirates mashup here. It's like, a baseball version of Glee or something.
Isn't it great to have a Pittsburgh podcast guest that actually knows what he's talking about. It's awesome.
It's yeah. Well, I mean, when you do a podcast, it's good to have people who know what they're talking about, right? It's a selling feature. Anyway, Steve, let everybody know how they can follow you.
Follow me on Twitter at US of J's. Please do visit our US of J's Facebook page. We have a special holiday offer. We're actually offering Ross Atkins bobbleheads. Now, truth be told, he doesn't make any moves, so it really is more of a figurine, but just in time for your holiday shopping.
I'm speechless. Okay, I didn't know where you were going with this. I was like, huh? How did he just bought a bunch of bobbleheads? But no, I guess not. Anyway. All right, Steve, again, thank you for joining me this week. It's always fun. So for all of our listeners and viewers and all of that, make sure you tune in every Sunday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time on YouTube, on Facebook, on Twitter. And if you miss it, for some reason you didn't set it in your calendar, make sure you catch the audio version on Google, Apple, Spotify, Stitcher. Everywhere you find a podcast, you'll find Jays from the Couch. And make sure you head to jaysfromthecouch.com for all of our Blue Jays coverage this offseason. So for Craig, for Steve, and for Ross Atkins and his bobblehead, this is Sean Doyle. You can follow me on Twitter at JFtC, hoping life throws you a juicy fastball down the middle and you don't miss it. Take care.